who remembers the story of Little Red Riding Hood? Okay, that's all of you. Now, I want you to raise your hand again if you know how the story ends. You're really reticent because you're like, there's got to be some sort of trick going on here. And you're right, there is a trick. Always be suspicious of me, especially when I'm standing up here. Because Little Red Riding Hood, like a lot of these fairy tales, we were not told the original endings. When you see oh gosh, what are the Aesop's fables and all of these really, really old stories? And what's that? And Grimm's fairy tales. Oh, even more so. Yeah, they're Grimm. I mean, it's right there in the title. But and the Brothers Grimm. I mean, when I grew up around these stories, it was told that Little Red Riding Hood, went into the house of the witch, was it, right? And the huntsman came, and well, I know I see some shaking heads, but we got different versions. Or it's not the witch. What was it? The grandma. That's right. I'm already skipping ahead to another story that I'm going to mention. The grandma, and my understanding is that in the original version of this, the wolf eats the grandma and eats Little Red Riding Hood. The end. Right? And we're all like, that's inspirational right there, isn't it? But then somewhere along the way, somebody said, let's not read this to small children. That'll give them nightmares. So somebody decided, well, okay, it's all right that the wolf eats the grandma and eats Little Red Riding Hood, but then the huntsman needs to come and split the wolf open so that they can rescue the two of them out of the stomach of the wolf. And we're like, oh, that is so much better. Woo, right? Let's read that. At least they're alive in the end, and good triumphs over evil. And then you have Hansel and Gretel, which that's where I was thinking of the witch, right? Where now, tell me if you heard a different version of this, but I think the original has Hansel and Gretel actually shoving the witch into her own oven, right? Which that's a little graphic. I don't see any kids here between the ages of 1 and like 12 in the room, so I think we're mostly okay. 1 and 10 maybe. But yeah, that's a little graphic. That's a little disturbing. And so I think later versions had the witch just running away, or Hansel and Gretel just escaped or something. So we don't have all of that blood and gore, right? It's interesting to consider how these previous generations, how these previous cultures that have gone before us, they lived in such a different world. They lived in a world where they had farm animals around them, and they just saw death every day, and they saw, horrible things by our own estimation. It's gruesome back in that time. So their stories would reflect the lives that they lived. And I feel like I have to put this in here because once again, for the second Sunday in a row, the story of Abraham comes in and kind of messes everything up for us. Because last Sunday was Father's Day, and we got Abraham like casting out his oldest son and his mother and being like, not the world's number one dad, And now, look at us. We have baptism. We can celebrate new life. We can celebrate parenthood. And for the occasion, we're going to tell a story about a dad who just about sacrifices his own son. Not what I would have picked. So how do we look at this but to think, well, when they were telling these stories, it was a very different world than what we're used to. Abraham, he didn't grow up Jewish. You couldn't really even say he was Jewish himself. He was a forerunner to this. But he grew up around all of these different pagan nations and all of these different cultures, many of which had child sacrifice. And yeah. And so if this is sort of the water that they swim in, this is the air that they breathe, and this is a plot device. Now, I'm not here to make a case for whether this story is historically true. Abraham definitely did this and took Isaac, and this is a historical fact. Maybe it is. I don't need for it to be fiction. But I do need for us to look at it as, what is the story trying to tell us? And I think if we focus on that, why is it here? And especially, why is it here for us to read on a beautiful, hopeful, happy day like today, in Baptism Sunday? Then I think it can come clear if we let it. Because Abraham was made a promise, and it took a long time for that promise to come to fulfillment. And we see it wasn't linear either. We see a lot of fits and starts along the way, a lot of stumbles, and that's kind of where we get the story of Ishmael too, some of which we read last Sunday. That was one of those bumps in the road toward God fulfilling the promise that he made to Abraham a decade or more previously. And so now he's finally here. He has the son of promise. This is Sarah's son. This is my son. And he's growing up. And imagine how tightly he holds on to that. Imagine how sheltered that kid must have been, living in a little bubble. Don't do anything dangerous. No, let me get that for you. Don't start that fire. Don't get too close. We must keep you alive. You are the son of promise. You are a gift from God, and a very special gift at that. And when God sees the promise that he gave to Abraham coming to fulfillment, and now Abraham, who had had his eyes focused on God for all these years, waiting for the work that God was going to do, now all of a sudden that focus shifts to Isaac. And I can imagine God watching Abraham in his life, in his family life, and saying, I used to have your attention. I used to have your devotion. I used to have your faith, and you trusted in me. You trusted in me at least enough to where we got to this point. And now it's all here. What do we do about that? Maybe we all have an Isaac. Maybe some of us have more than one kid. Some of us have no kids. But I think we all have an Isaac in our lives. That thing that we worked so hard to get, that thing that we waited for so long to see come to fruition in our lives. And now it's here. And we can't bear even the thought of letting go. We all have that Isaac, whatever it is. Maybe we have more than one. And when God sees us in this situation, God is thinking, you know what? I am glad you're enjoying this. But don't forget the giver for the gift. Don't we see that too as parents with our kids? And we give them something that they're so into now, they don't even remember to say thank you. And they become a little bit of a brat. And you're becoming mean to me because I gave you this thing that it's now all you can think about. So Abraham needs to learn to shift his focus back. Now, there are people who've tried to sanitize this story as well, just like they did with Little Red Riding Hood or with Hansel and Gretel, but they can't change the details of the story, right? Because we all have it right there in Genesis. So what they'll do is they'll say, well, look. Abraham, when we're really backpedaling here, but when he says, let's go up to the mountain, and his son says, where's the sacrifice? He says, God will provide the sacrifice. So therefore, Abraham knew in advance God wasn't going to make me do this. That God will provide a sacrifice. There'll be a ram in the thicket, which is what happened, right? And we can sacrifice that instead of my son. Maybe that would also mean that God and Abraham are just playing mind games with each other. Does it really accomplish the purpose? There's other people who will say, well, Abraham knew that even if he sacrificed his son, that God would bring him back to life. I think maybe that's a little closer. You can substantiate that a little more. But at the same time, what you have is Abraham kind of second-guessing God and saying, no, this wouldn't really happen. He wouldn't really take my son away from me. So let me just go through the motions. I'll walk through the steps and just not tell God that this is what I'm thinking. Right? If I can keep God guessing, then we'll be okay. But you see why these don't really satisfy the message of the story. I happen to believe that Abraham had to reckon with that loss on his way up the mountain and think, whew, I kind of have forgotten about God, and it's been all about Isaac all this time. Maybe I need to remember that he doesn't belong to me. And I'll share this message with Kylie later, but with you, Trenton. And well, both of our babies are gone. we lost them both. That's okay. They'll be back. But you guys are at the beginning stages of starting to grasp this reality that as a baby, our children feel like they really do belong to us. This is my son. This is my daughter. And we sort of earned that too through the sleepless nights and through all the feeding and the vomiting or all the fluids, whatever, right? The screaming, the inconvenience of it. We're like, yeah, that's my son. Although there's some days we're like, no, that's your son. Will you comfort your son, please? But there is that sense of full ownership. But when we really stop to consider it, that ownership isn't there. Even at 1 day old, that child is a human, is every bit as much human as I am. Every bit as much human as you are. You're not more human. You're just more mature. You're more grown up. They have the agency of self, the agency of identity that they just haven't found yet. They haven't figured it out yet. And we all know we can't own another human, even if it's our own child. We are stewards. We're given children to steward them. And I'll close with this thought, because I often, whenever I get to know a foster parent or a foster family, and I have known some have been friends of mine, my first thought, and I'm sure they hear this a lot, oh, I could never do that. I could never do what you're doing. I couldn't take on a child who may be troubled or just may be, without a family for some reason, and love that child and care for that child, and then 6 months later or 1 year later or however long it is, then say, okay, it was fun. How do you devote yourself? How do you give your heart to someone when you know that's going to end? But if you think about it, all parenting is foster parenting. It's just with a little less certainty and a little longer timetable, hopefully, right? You're just stewarding that child. And as long as we remember that, then we can keep our eyes on the giver and not get obsessed with the gift. And thank God every day for the privilege of stewarding this human life as it learns to speak. She learns to speak, learns to walk, learns to dance, learns to do long division. We get to be part of that journey. And not only parents with their own kids, but I think all of us as a community, like we get to be stewards of these children too. And whether they're babies like Margot or Rory, or whether they're toddlers or young children, I hope that we as a community see ourselves as stewards of them, as foster parents in a way, as surrogate parents. And that we get to be part of helping to raise them. And this morning we get to be a part of welcoming them. And this one in particular, which here he is. Don't mean to embarrass you, but he's back. Of welcoming him into this community, of not just saying, hey, lucky for you, you're a member of an awesome church, but to rather say that we are inviting you into this embrace of love, of community. And just like Jesus said, I hadn't mentioned the gospel yet, so here it is. Like Jesus saying, whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones will not lose their reward. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me. When you welcome Rory, you welcome Jesus into our midst. When you welcome Margot, when you welcome Elijah, when you welcome Asher, when you welcome Julian, Lily, any of these, You are welcoming Jesus into our midst. And so I want to give you a practical challenge in this. If we're going to keep our eyes on God, we're going to keep our eyes on Jesus and make sure that we are always welcoming him among us, that we give a very practical welcome to these. I hope we all greet our kids by name when they come in. I hope we all ask them about their week. What have you been doing? What are you really into right now? Here, come and sit with me at brunch. Because we cannot expect to have Jesus in our midst unless we're welcoming the least of these also. And sometimes the least of these means the shortest. Amen. I'll put this down.